in identity, the education and the ability to do something herself, to succeed, to have a profession, to be recognized. This made all of the difference. On the other end of Africa, I also met some remarkable, really remarkable woman. I was the guest of Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, who, as you know, is the president, re-elected to a second term. In fact, I had brought Ellen here for a lunch once when she was working in Washington. And Ellen had, well, the background, there are some similarities with Wangari, in that their fathers were tribal people, but very much into the new openings in society, very much into democracy, very much wanting their daughters to have the opportunities. And Ellen got them. She also married a man who was abusive, had 4 kids with him, and had the courage, as did Wangari, when she was abused, and the support to get up and say, no, no more, get a divorce. And being in a society in which they could get a divorce. Not without penalty of the way people talked about them, and they had to face some real barriers that way. Got divorced, and they followed their beliefs, their knowledge of themselves, into creating something for the whole world. And there's enormous respect. I compare them with a woman I know very well, who is from Cameroon, who didn't have these advantages in too many ways, and only after a life that was horrible to even recount, when she was an immigrant here, found herself able to say, no, no more, I'm not going to be beaten anymore. She was the one who was earning the money. She was keeping a drug addict husband. She was having more babies. And she got up and said, no, no more. And one of the ways she found herself able to continue, this is a really interesting story that's in here, was she searched for community. She searched for community. She knew that she had a grandfather who was a French Jew. And she started looking for identity. She joined a synagogue, she converted, and she found community. And she found the support that she had never before had, since her grandmother, who raised her earliest years, had died and she was left adrift. She had an identity. So she couldn't get the education that she wanted at that point, but she has seen to it that every one of her 7 or 8 children has had the educational opportunity. And she's very proud of the fact that 2 of her sons are presently enrolled in a community college, and they are going someplace, and that her little granddaughter, who she's taken on herself to raise, is learning, is part of a stimulating community in preschool. Okay. That's how she got it. It was, she had to claw her way through. She did. Very, very important. The woman has to be able to say no. She has to have a community that sanctions her freedom and her integrity. And that's what's missing in a lot of places. So we look at all of Africa, and we see that, well, in East and West Africa, I found some heroines, some icons. And then in South Africa, I found my friend Lindy Mayeza, who is Zulu. And Lindy had become part of the Women's Institute for training women. And it was a literacy organization. It was part of an institute formed by Desmond Tutu. And it was the only place, Wildspret Fellowship Center, was the only place in South Africa, which, as Lindy said, was a zebra. Black and white could come together. This was in the time of apartheid. And the place where black and white came together in South Africa was through the women's movement. And there you see, in that, again, the critical nature of women helping women, women supporting women, and together being able to fight the violence around and change the violent society, which they did. That change in apartheid is largely the work of women coming together. And it's not sung about so much, but if you're there, what you see are the women doing the singing about it. That's how you learn. And it's always Mother Africa, Mother Earth. That which gives life, as far as Africans know, is Mother. It's a very honorable designation. So we move from Africa to the Middle East. And these are all, oh, there was Lindy back there a couple of shots before, and at Wildspret. There they are. I watched her daughter and her grandson growing up, and they stayed with me here when I lived in Virginia, and I stayed with them there. So I learned a lot from Lindy and from her daughter Butwa. We got lost a few times going to Mozambique when we were trying to go to the National Reserve instead. But we found our way. And that was South Africa. Okay, we moved to the Middle East. Now, a lot of the tribalism that's presently practiced is because of the conditions of life. You have to remember what the conditions of life were for people in places like the deserts and the mountains, and understand how they formed societies, because life was very harsh. The climate was very harsh. To survive in these desert places, you had to be covered from top to bottom, because there are sandstorms, there are windstorms, there's an unrelenting sun, and then at night it's cold, cold, cold. One of the things that happened in these desert places and mountain places that constitute much of North Africa and Asia was that the development of horses and camels for transportation meant that there was a way for men to move from one place to another to find arable land, to find resources. And the fight for resources meant you had to protect the helpless from destruction if you wanted your line to move on. So women were protected by being put in head-to-toe coverings and being denied any access from others. And my favorite description of women in these societies is that if a man criticizes or makes fun of your horse, kill him. Drop the ball. If he makes fun or says anything about your wife, you kill her. Why? It's honor killing. But because if you kill a man, then his clan goes after you. And then your clan has to go after him, and you have a whole big war. But if he has dishonored, if your woman has dishonored you by being the object of another man's scrutiny, you kill her. And that puts an end to it. You don't have to pay any money. So that was one of the things that was very important to understand about what happens in the Middle East. And then we go to Afghanistan, and we find that the history of Afghanistan is full of this kind of belief system, and that if we look at contemporary situation, and I notice my time is almost up, but if we look at the contemporary situation, we find that costume, tribal law, predominates. And if there's a difference between Islamic law, and Pashtun law prevails. And honor killing is very much a part of Pashtun law. And victimization of women is part of it. No education for girls, and so on. Now, there's one exception, again, that I found in this very terrible story of the Middle East. And that was in Israel, the Bedouin of the Negev. And this is a very wonderful story because it shows you what can happen when equity is enforced. And whatever your politics are, the important thing was that about 15 years ago, 15 or 20 years ago, Israel decided to enforce gender equity on the Bedouin of the Negev. And what they did was end the marriage of girls, 13, 14, enforced schooling for girls and boys to the age of 18, enforced the laws against genital mutilation, and Israel is probably the only place left in the Middle East in which genital mutilation has not only decreased, but amongst the Bedouin and the Negev, it's down to 0. They've made it possible for all of the women in the Negev to have their babies in hospitals. So infant mortality and maternal